All right, welcome everyone to episode 1 of the Canadian Basketball Performance Podcast. My name is Kevin Wilson, and I am super excited to bring this podcast to life. For those that are new to our platform, the Canadian Basketball Performance Network, or CBPN, aims to elevate athlete care and physical development across Canada, while also mentoring the next generation of medical and performance professionals. We have educational conferences, mentorship cohorts, podcasts, career growth opportunities, and networking events they're all designed to help attendees to grow. Our Canadian Basketball Performance Conferences will take place virtually on February 8th for high school athletes and March 14th and 15th for medical and performance professionals. That includes ATs, PTs, strength coaches, sports scientists, etc. Big shout out to our conference sponsors for that. And to learn more about everything that we have to offer through the CBPN, you can visit thecbpn.com. And honestly, we're just trying to create something dope, something that I wish I had personally growing up, and trying to elevate in this field. That said, I'm excited to present episode 1 featuring Ilic, truly a legend in the space. Joining me is Taylor Thiessen, lead strength and conditioning coach at Brock University for men's and women's basketball, and support strength coach for Canada basketball. For those that don't know my background, former G League and NBA strength coach with the OKC Thunder and LA Lakers, currently leading the CBPN initiatives and also supporting Canada basketball with S&C. But that's enough about us. That's a long enough intro. Nem, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Appreciate it, fellas.
Appreciate you. Just start with your background. You have such a unique background. Obviously coming from Serbia and coming here and doing everything that you've done. So I just want to start from the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in Serbia, moved to Canada when I was about 2 years old. So I still carry a lot of, Serbian pride. I'm sure you know how the Serbians are when it comes to basketball, when it comes to, our heritage and stuff. So I'm big on, maintaining that. And I grew up playing basketball, right? That's a big part of our community, sports in general. But basketball was like the thing. So being in that community, growing up in Hamilton, being part of like youth play and all that, basketball was my whole life. It kind of gave me the little bit of showing me how to work hard, showing me discipline and consistency with, putting in work and chasing dreams. Unfortunately, I'm not the typical, 6'6" Serb, but it taught me a lot. And then as I transitioned out of basketball, I was like, how do I stay involved with the sport? And luckily I just kind of got into the strength and conditioning side of things, training in general, and that was like my way to like stay involved, give stuff to younger athletes that maybe I wish I could have had back then as well. And that's what kind of led me on my journey.
Yeah, so with that and your background getting into strength and conditioning, what really made that transition happen from athlete into strength and conditioning coach? And then did you start somewhere where it was more like general populations and work your way into training athletes and then high level athletes, or did you jump straight into training athletes?
So yeah, like transitioning from, being an athlete, playing sports at a young age to trying to find a profession once you stop playing is tough. It's what a lot of guys struggle with, I feel like, as they get older, being athletes and, whether they're playing pro or they're playing at the college level. So for me, as I kind of got into working out and training myself, it was a matter of like, experimenting with different things, trying to figure out what I wanted to do as an individual, gaining some strength, gaining some size. And then I just kind of fell in love with that little process and journey, and just digging into different methods and different types of, training modalities and all that stuff. And that was kind of my way when I saw this is my opportunity to stay involved with basketball, and I want to give, younger athletes a chance to do things the right way, especially in Hamilton, not knowing many people that did that as a profession when it comes to, one-on-one working with athletes. So that was kind of my way to stay involved and my little transition.
Awesome. I work at Brock University, as Kevin said, and part of what we do is we offer an internship to sports performance student coaches as well as sports medicine student coaches. And we have, let's say, roughly 50 students in each of those, with the goal of being like providing an opportunity for students in their third and fourth year, second and first years, if they're really eager, to get real world experience working with athletes in the sports medicine, sports performance field. To me, a lot of what they see is like working with a team sport at the collegiate setting. Obviously, that's the opportunity we're providing. Or they see maybe past that the opportunity to go work with Oklahoma City Thunder as a team strength coach or physiotherapist. Can you speak a little bit to working in the private setting, but not necessarily like at a private gym, and where these opportunities may come from and your maybe journey into that out of athlete and out of school?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, the traditional journey is start with, maybe the youth, work your way into high school level, college level, pro level. For me, I had a unique opportunity where it was after Shea's rookie season. I was just reached out to his team at the time. I was like, does he work with anybody? What's he doing in the summertime? I thought he's playing in LA, he's just gonna stay in LA. You're expecting a kid from Hamilton to be like, let me get out of Hamilton. But obviously, fast forward, he'll come here every opportunity he gets. And that was kind of my way that the door just kind of opened for me. So it's lucky in a way, but again, I'm big on as long as you're prepared, stuff will come your way. So it was a little bit different. I didn't really go down the team route. And I know that it is a big thing. People like doing that stuff. I just felt like I wanted to go through the individual aspect where guys want to come to me because they want to work with me, as opposed to dealing with, in a team setting, you're going to have guys that are going to be doing their own thing, not listening to you. And it just wasn't something that I wanted to be a part of. So going down that private sector, it gave me the opportunity to control everything from my end, from a business standpoint, from who I actually work with, who wants to work with me, who reaches out. I have the ability to say no to somebody. And that was kind of what I always enjoyed, and not having to be tied down to some sort of team or whatever the case was. And that's just a preference thing. I mean, I knew I was ready to go down that route if I needed to get to where I wanted to get to. Again, luckily the opportunity arose, and I kind of just took it from there. But I know it is a big thing where working with the teams, and it's just a little bit different when you go from an individual. You kind of dedicate everything to them, to their schedule, to what their individual needs are, and you just develop a little bit of a different relationship and a closeness with that individual, knowing what works well for them, what they don't even enjoy doing, just the little things. And that's where I feel like the biggest difference is from a team setting.
What most people don't talk about on the team side is what you mentioned, which is like athlete compliance, trying to work with different personalities, all the other factors, all the other stakeholders, everything else. And again, like as Taylor mentioned, like these young students coming up are just looking at the NBA All-Stars, and they're just saying like, I just want to train that, without knowing everything else around it. And when I talk to, guys like yourself, guys like Mike Mencius with Braun, guys like Tyler Lesher, and what's his name, Charles Loftus with Norman Powell, like all these guys with working directly with someone, like it just sounds so refreshing, just understanding who that athlete is wholeheartedly, like the care and the attention and the detail that you're putting into like one athlete or like a few athletes on your caseload. Like it just seems like a great, it's refreshing, right? Because everyone just looks at the team side and they're just like, I want to get there, right?
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is like, I kind of treat it the same way I treat my life and my training, right? It's just an extension of that. The same stuff I'm going to think about with recovery, with nutrition, with all those things. I want to have some sort of input with a said athlete, right? Like if I'm going to be working with you, it's not just here's 1 hour and then you're doing your own thing. I don't know anything about you. Like I want to make sure, like, what are you eating? What does your day-to-day look like? All the little things that they might not be thinking about. And, if you just kind of say things randomly, guys aren't going to really listen unless one, you do it yourself and show some of the benefits, or two, like you really ask questions like, like, what does your day look like? What are you indoors all day in the summertime? Like just little things of like, making positive changes and giving your body, the right inputs to make actual beneficial change, not just from a basketball standpoint or a performance standpoint, but a life standpoint as well.
Yeah, so going off of that, again, I think the opportunity that you have and you as a strength coach working with individual athletes and obviously some of the top athletes in the NBA, It's still a little foreign maybe to what that process actually looks like. Not necessarily like gaining clients, but I think a lot of students that have had the opportunity to do an internship with a team setting, which is very common in the North American model, is they see strength coach, assistant strength coach, work with team for an hour or two, they might attend practice, and then their time with those athletes are done. Yourself, I'm assuming there's a lot more contact and connection throughout the day and throughout the week. But can you maybe touch on like in season and off season for an NBA athlete? What does that actually look like for someone that works with an individual athlete? Like, are you in constant communication with them? Are they reaching out as needed? Are you flying out to see them? What's travel look like in season? Can you touch on some of those things?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a big difference when it comes, I think during off season, a lot of it, because they're home, I'm with them more, I make sure all those things are taken into account. And when there are training sessions from a basketball standpoint or travel days where they got to do some of their shoots or whatever the case is, like I'm there with them. I'm making sure I'm still kind of taking all those things into account. In season, it's definitely a lot different. You know, I traveled to, for example, with Nikhil quite a bit during the year, and we've gotten to a point where, you know, I'll have stuff, whether it's online for him, just that he can kind of maintain. So it's not like I'm talking to him every single day, but there are check-in days, especially after games, like how are you feeling? If it was, you know, if let's say something happened or whatever the case is, you know, I'll check in, I'll see where he's at and then adjust accordingly. You know, I think the biggest thing where guys get lost is like not actually seeing how the athlete feels. It's a lot of like data and stuff that people want to use and numbers and all that sort of stuff, which is great. But I feel like we're doing that so much and getting away from like, all right, like tell me how you actually feel. How did you sleep? How did you wake? Like, do you feel recovered? As opposed to just constantly just worrying about numbers and such. So I try to go down that route and then adjust accordingly. Like, all right, if you're tired today, we'll ease off a little bit, right? Like we'll actually use your feelings and your words into account. Again, depending on the schedule and stuff, like I'll go down when they have like a homestand, just so I'm there. It's just a little bit easier to get the work in. Like I said, I feel like when you spend so much time with somebody during the summer, you know what things, you know, benefit them, what actually moves the needle. And it's less of a guessing game. I can actually go in there, do what things, you know, make them feel good from a recovery standpoint, especially if minutes, back-to-backs, all the stuff of an NBA schedule. Like a lot of guys, people don't really know what, you know, an NBA season looks like. You know, they think, they're just playing a game, but like morning shoot-arounds, film, pre-game, you know, workouts, like it's like a 10-hour day on a game day, right? It's not your typical what people think, they just get to the arena and, you know, games at 7:30, they get there at 6:30 and they play. Like that's not how it is. It's a full day of stuff. So making sure that they still have all the tools and stuff to go through, like how do we just decompress from this too? You know what I mean? Like it's not the easiest thing to go through. Like if somebody works 10 hours a day, they're coming home exhausted, right? We speak to the general pop in that fashion so much that, you need to just be able to, you know, go work out, give yourself more. But like these guys are doing a lot more, right? So being able to kind of work around that, you know, we'll stay in touch. And then I like to stay in touch also with the team staff too. Like, you know, especially with Andrew and OKC. Like we have a great relationship. Every time he's needs something or wants some sort of question during the summer, he'll hit me up. I'll get back to him, and then vice versa during the season. I make sure if I see anything with Shea, or if he's taking a game or he had a little bit of a contusion or something, I'll always just check in and see like what does he see. I like to make sure there's no ego in there. I think it's when you're looking at it from the athlete's point of view and their standpoint, like they come first. So has nothing to do with whether I'm doing all of it or you're doing all of it. As long as we put them first, it's a little bit easier to kind of go about. And that makes like the in-season schedule. It's fun. I mean, it's cool. It does require a little bit more of like planning and adjustment because of the schedule that the NBA demands. But it's for sure, there's differences with the in-season, off-season when it comes to all that stuff. But I feel like just making sure, you're on top of it and you're making the adjustments as if it's you, it's easy to kind of go about.
Yeah. I was going to ask this one a little later, but since you touched on it, like your ability and willingness to collaborate with team staff is like next level, right? So I experienced it firsthand being in OKC, seeing how you interact with like AP, and honestly, like I've physically seen, you know, other external strength coaches, therapists, whatever, like work with team staffs, and I've seen it not go as well, right? Or I've seen it probably a bit more complex than it needs to be. So when it comes to like collaborating with a team, you know, not only just medical, because I'm sure at some point you'll chat with like Mark or with front office or say like things like that, right? So whether external trainer or internal trainer, like what are your strategies for success when it comes to like engaging with other stakeholders?
Yeah, I've seen it a lot too. And I've heard, you know, as I got into it, that sometimes there might be some tension there and some friction, but I've always gone into it with an open mind. Like I'm not here to come and try and take your job, right? That's not my goal. I'm not here to try and step on anybody. It's just the athlete is my priority. And as long as we can kind of collaborate to make sure that they're the focus of attention, then what I'm doing, what you're doing, as long as it's helping them, doesn't matter, right? So I think it's just like who I am too. Like I'm not gonna try and just go and say, nah, what you're saying is wrong, or what you want to do is wrong. I'll always make sure, like I'll give my input, I'll give my opinion, and you know, whatever the athlete kind of needs, that's what my focus is. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's been. I mean, there's been teams that it hasn't been easy, and I think that's just from maybe their past experiences, kind of like set the tone at the beginning. There's just a little bit of friction there. But for me, like especially with OKC, because I was with Shea before he got traded there, I felt like the respect from OKC staff was just there from the beginning. And I could feel that just from a human level. Like you can feel, okay, somebody respects what you have to say from the beginning, so why would I not show the same respect back?
Yeah.
And that has given me the ability to just kind of be super open with them, super in touch. Like I said, during the season, during the off season, they let me do my thing, they do their thing during the year, but there's some sort of communication here and there. It's not every day. And like I said, I feel like if my goal isn't to come take somebody's job, then I'm not going to do anything that's going to step on anybody's toes and, you know, make that more complex, like you said, than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Where I feel like a lot of guys might come in with a little bit of ego, like, I'm better than you, or I'm working with him, whatever the case is, and then that just kind of sets things up for failure.
Yep. Yeah, so we touched on, obviously you train Shea, Keel, like league MVP, high-minute NBA players. That doesn't span your entire business. Do you want to touch a little bit on your business and really kind of where your passions lie with regards to training from kind of youth through to pro?
Yeah, so as I've been doing this a little bit more now, like I've been really gaining the fire and passion to help even like younger athletes before they get to that level, not just even from a development standpoint, but just like habits and, you know, actually going through some of the stuff that these guys go through on a day-to-day. Like being with Shea for as long as I've been with him, and then for Nikhil as long as I've been with him, I know their day-to-day, what they do, how much time they actually dedicate to it. Sometimes I got to tell Nikhil, for example, like, yo, just chill, right? Like he wants to do a lot. And for me, from a business standpoint, like, you know, trying to work with some of the youth athletes as well, just to be like, okay, like this is some of the stuff that that's gonna be required of you if you want to get to that level, right? A lot of guys that they'll see, you know, NBA athletes or whatever it is, whatever sport it is, doing certain things and think that this is what got them there. And it's not really the case. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say I made, you know, Shea or Nikhil the athlete that they are. My goal is just to supplement who they are, right? Like try and have them be able to be available and play and do all those things. That's the only way they're going to showcase their talent. And so for me, like getting in, working with the youth is just becoming a little bit more exciting as well to try and, you know, get them to that level.
Yeah, we were talking off camera. Kevin and I both have young kids that hopefully eventually make their way into playing youth basketball. Could you touch on maybe what that might actually look like? Like when you put the parent hat on that's spending every resource for their kid to make it as far as they can in basketball, and they're training with an extra trainer, skills development, all these things. Like you mentioned, they see what you might be doing with a professional athlete and be like, my 13-year-old needs to be doing what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's doing. Could you touch on maybe what youth development looks like, or the principles you might use when you're training a developmental athlete?
Yeah, it's definitely not like, from a parent standpoint, like you got to know these guys are now, late 20s. Like they've gone through, if a child is 12 years old, like that's 15 years of experience, of working out, of whatever the case is. It's a lot of years. So to think that they have to be doing the same thing is obviously not the case. I mean, they gotta work their way to that level. And I feel like from a youth standpoint, it just depends on where that kid is at the time that you start with them. Like, I'm not gonna throw, if a kid's still, like, from a movement standpoint, I feel like that should be priority for youth. How it, like, the quality of movement, how they're actually moving, as opposed to like, okay, let's try and get this kid as strong as possible at the age of 13. Like, that stuff is gonna come. Somebody like Shai, like, he played his whole rookie season when we worked together. After that rookie season, he couldn't do a push-up. So like, the strength wasn't there yet. Then all of a sudden, a year or two goes by, our work, plus him just kind of maturing and growing into his body, it was a massive transition. He went from like boy to man quick. But that's gonna happen. So it's like the quality of movement, and then the habits off the court, out of the training aspect, like what are these kids doing on a day-to-day basis? I feel like all those things matter as much. And from a parent standpoint, it's like, you can't just let your kid work with anybody. I mean, you can't, I'm not even saying just because I work with Shai and Nikhil, that they gotta work with me too. Like, if I was somebody that didn't care about youth, like, I wouldn't be the right fit. You know what I mean? So I feel like you got to do your research to see what this person does, how they kind of adjust to who they work with, because I just don't think that everything needs to be the same. I'm not going to put a 13-year-old that just started doing the same stuff that I have some of my pro guys doing, right? Like, they got to get there. I think there's still like a human level of athlete that eventually, they need to be doing the same stuff. They need to be doing, things that are going to help them as an athlete, but like, how you kind of build to that standpoint, I think tells a lot.
Yeah, so you've touched on like movement and quality of movement. You're doing the podcast Barefoot. Can you touch a little bit on like your training philosophy when it comes to like the actual strength and conditioning development of individual athlete, and how you kind of apply that philosophy of like movement first into let's develop this athlete to become better?
Right. Yeah, that's a big thing for sure. So as I've kind of been doing it, as I've kind of been working with these guys, and I've seen it more and more, the guys at this level, like, the strength is there, the power is there, their vertical jump is there. Like, for me, if a guy was to come into a summer and be like, I want to increase my vertical by 2 inches, like, what is that going to add to your game? What value is that going to add to who you are? You're already playing at the highest level in the world. So do those 2 inches actually benefit you at all? The risk to reward. So for me, it's kind of like, well, what is the quality of your movement in terms of, on a basketball court, in a sprint, in a change of direction, like, how are you actually moving? And I feel like that a lot of that stuff gets neglected, and it just comes down to like, can we get this athlete to squat 315, to deadlift, 420, whatever it is. Like, just very number driven. And I feel like from a quality standpoint, that has been my priority with guys at this level. That's where I go back to like the youth. Like, sure, we want to reach certain values of strength, certain values of power and speed as that athlete kind of ages. So there's going to be a little bit of differences there. But I feel like at the pro level, guys already are who they are. They play how they play. So focusing on just numbers and stuff has never made sense to me from a standpoint of like, all right, how do I get this guy better? And that kind of ties back into like the barefoot stuff. It all started with me, during my basketball days. Like, I would roll my ankle 3 times a year. Like, just landing on somebody, just little things. I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why is this happening so often? And it wasn't until I got older that I started to look at it. So I think my barefoot journey probably started like maybe 2019-ish, so 6 years now. And I was training, during that summer, I was training like 10 hours a day, clients. So as I got into like wearing Vivos and wearing barefoot shoes, I could spend 2 hours in those shoes and my feet were screaming. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, I'm wearing shoes for sure they're barefoot shoe, but I'm wearing something for 2 hours, and then after 2 hours, I couldn't walk. Like, my feet were sore from all the way from feet, ankles, up until like my knees and everything. So I would transition to regular shoes after 2 hours just so I could, survive. Started to build up the tolerance, and then I started to see all the benefits, I just started to feel all that pressure kind of alleviate. And then, Shay at the time was dealing with a little bit of plantar fasciitis. I think it was 2019 or 2020. So for me, it was like, hey, there's no way I'm gonna be working with the guy and he's gonna be dealing with foot and ankle issues, at this young of an age. I gotta attack this from the beginning and make sure that we get rid of this, we solve this, and this isn't an ongoing issue. So I think I knew about it maybe in like February of the NBA season. So from February till like April, I was just like, all right, let me dive into all this, foot ankle stuff, and just how do we attack this from the standpoint of like, hey, we need to, adjust the training, strengthen from the ground up to see, okay, how can we get rid of this? And as I started to feel less and less pain, I went from wearing a size 11 my whole life. Well, once I got to a size 11 and hooping, to I was barefoot for like a year, and my foot naturally just decompressed and expanded to the point where a size 11, if I put it on, would absolutely kill. Like, I couldn't fit into a size 11 anymore. So that just told me, like, I've been wearing shoes that literally don't fit my feet for the past 10 years. So then, I transitioned to wearing size 12. Then all of a sudden I was spending more and more time barefoot. And I started to see the differences from a strength standpoint, from a feeling of like, okay, I actually feel what my foot is doing when I squat, when I do any sort of lunge work, when I actually plant, like being able to have the ability to feel the ground, to feel what the rest of my body's doing. Tagged Shay's plantar fasciitis, got rid of it within like 2 weeks. And knock on wood, but it's never been an issue since. So going through all that stuff, and then you hear the feedback of like, okay, like during his games, I remember, some of the Olympic stuff, World Cup stuff, we're doing a lot of foot stuff with Nikhil and Shay, and both of them were like, damn, I just feel like my foot, I feel it more in my shoe, right? Like, you're still gonna wear these shoes hooping, because from a performance standpoint, they still provide some sort of, boost, but I feel like it's just a matter of like, what do you do outside of when you're hooping, right? Like, and the biggest thing for me is like, you look at marathon runners, for example, they have a race day shoe, right? The carbon plate, like the performance boost. They don't train their whole prep in that shoe, right? Like, you're spending time, you want to be able to work the muscles in the foot and the lower leg. So as they're going through all that stuff, like, you're not constantly in that shoe. So I would just get barefoot as much as possible, because I feel like it gives you a sense of like, all right, from the ground up, what the hell am I feeling? Like, where's my foot? Where's my body? How is my lower leg loading? Where's my knee, relative to that foot and ankle? Do I feel like I have the ability to, drive the knuckles of my foot through the ground, my big toe through the ground? Because you see guys all the time and like everything is just lifting. They feel like they look like they're off balance. And you'll see people just right away jump into like uneven surfaces, balancing on like a Bosu ball, but they don't even have the ability to like actually have a strong foot on a stable surface. So that's a big part of my training and philosophy is from that foot standpoint, being barefoot, just giving the body the ability to up the chain, like to send the right signals from a first step standpoint, right? So everything else loads properly.
And I feel like anyone that follows you knows what I'm about to say, and that is there's an awareness for like the benefits of barefoot training, and then there's like NEMS barefoot training, and I just feel like everything you're doing, whether it's in the snow or like running, was it a marathon that you did?
It was a 5K.
It was a 5K.
People always say marathon. I don't correct them. I'm just like, yeah, sure. I know, but it was a 5K.
Yeah. So like, that to me is like next level, right? Like that's like not only from like a biomechanical, physiological benefit standpoint, like from a mindset standpoint, that's like next level, right? So I guess speak to that, like, where does the mind go when you're doing things like that, and then how do you try and encourage athletes to have that same mindset, same approach towards just grasping that?
For sure, and I feel like that's where it all stems from athlete first. Biggest thing for me was like, what can these guys learn from me from a mental standpoint, from my dedication to my craft, what I do, that can help them as not only just a basketball player, but as a young man themselves. And I've always been, like I said, during my youth times, like basketball was everything. Like I would be in the gym at 6 a.m. in the morning. I would be doing all those things, to maybe like some sort of extreme level, but it was just always, my mindset. And a lot of it kind of stemmed from Kobe, Mamba mentality. Like that's a big thing for me looking up to as I was growing up. A lot of that barefoot stuff also came from the point, like, how much can I actually push this? Like I've gotten my foot to the point where, like I said, 2 hours of walking a day I would be in pain for the rest of the day, to the point where, can I run barefoot? Like, does this actually impact me from a pain standpoint? As I started to try and push it more and more, I just wanted to see, like, okay, the work that I'm doing for myself, how much strength have I actually gained in my feet? Like, can I go, I started off with like running 2K. Can I go run 2K? Sure, running on the grass was easy. And then all of a sudden I tried to do it on the pavement. The difference was, like, obviously my feet weren't calloused to the friction of the pavement and the cement. So trying to build that up. Then it got to the point where, like, doing 5K from a pain standpoint and from a strength standpoint, like, my feet were there. They were able to do it. It just came down to, like, all right, when I did my 5K race barefoot, I couldn't walk for 3 days, not because I was in pain, but not because I was in like soreness pain, but because of like the blisters and everything that formed from, running on pavement at a pretty decent pace for 5K. I think I did it in like 19 minutes and 20 seconds, right? Barefoot. So no support of like the carbon plate to push off of, like it was just me in the ground. And a big part of that was just kind of like, okay, how much can I push something that I'm trying to preach? Like, I don't want these guys to go do this. Like, it's not going to benefit them. At least, maybe when they retire, they can do some crazy stuff to have that competitive, those competitive juices flowing. But for me, it was a matter of like, how much can I actually push this foot ankle stuff to see like what my body can actually tolerate and not be in pain. So that's kind of where it stemmed from. And then the mindset standpoint for me, like I said, Mamba mentality is the biggest thing. And then came my brand of Unlocked. And it's just a matter of like, how much of your true potential can you unlock? So always looking for ways to just to get better mentally and physically. And that's where I feel like a lot of that barefoot extremeness comes from. But at the end of the day, it's like the premise of it is for the athlete in terms of what I can show them, what your body can do, and then that way they can, not go run barefoot, but they can spend some more time barefoot and help them on the basketball court because they have just better foot control, better ankle control every step they take.
When you run now with shoes, do you find like the running economy like improved because of?
Yeah, big time. Like you start to really feel it, and even when I do wear my shoes, now I'm like super picky with the shoes that I will run in. I want to make sure I still feel my foot in the shoe. And every step that I take, I still try and, opt for a 0 drop shoe where I can still feel like my body's doing the work, right? I've developed a strength in the lower leg and the foot and ankle complex that like, I want to make sure the shoe that I wear complements that. I'm not just, hopping into something with a lot of cushion that it's not really based off of me anymore. It's the shoe. But yeah, for sure, like it's definitely a big change.
Yeah, we'll stay on topic here, but obviously you mentioned you'll go to the extreme and run a 5K barefoot. I'm going to assume, and I think you've kind of alluded to, you're not going to ask your NBA athletes to go and do the same thing. Could you touch on maybe what that exercise prescription might actually look like when you are deciding like, okay, what is shoes on and what is shoes off? Because we know in a sport like basketball, like our athletes are in shoes that are 1 to 2 inches of foam underneath their feet and air bubbles and all this tech that's in these shoes these days. When do you decide, like, okay, shoes are off, and when do you decide, okay, obviously this is equipment that's part of their sport and they need to wear this?
So I would say the training that we do, we go shoes off unless we're doing anything on court, right, from a change of direction standpoint, or we're outside doing some sort of sprints, on a track or a field. Aside from that, when we're in here, we go barefoot. Like, I want them to have the strength to do their plyo work, to do their, all their loading work barefoot, so that they actually feel what the hell they're doing. That way, it becomes easier in the shoes. Like I said, I want the shoes to be a performance enhancer. Like, this is your cheat code to what your body can actually already tolerate, what your body can actually, use from itself. And then when you go hoop, when you go do your stuff, like, you can still feel what your body's doing, but you have that little performance boost. So it was somebody during the summertime was when they were asking me a few questions about my barefoot stuff, and she kind of said, do you have like a no shoe zone sign? And I was like, damn, that's a pretty good thing. Like, I'm gonna need that because we don't wear shoes at all during our training. And like I said, I just feel like being able to do everything that is required of you in a weight room setting, being able to do it barefoot is only going to benefit you, right? A lot of guys can't do it, but it also takes like progression to get there. I'm not going to just throw somebody that's been wearing shoes that has all sorts of foot issues into a full workout barefoot. Like, they're not going to be able to do it. They're going to feel sore as hell. They're not going to feel everything that I want them to be feeling. So we kind of work towards that goal. And starting off with just doing some specific stuff at the foot and ankle level as we build into, like, okay, doing plyo work. So whether that's, extensive plyo work, whether that's actual, high intensity plyo work, whatever the case is, to eventually that's our goal.
Now, when we get into durability, right, for an athlete specifically like Shay, who lives in like deceleration, angles, contact. So again, I guess incorporating everything that we just talked about barefoot, but also like just other qualities, right, that make up those movement patterns. What qualities matter most for durability in your opinion? When it comes to those actions.
Sure. So this is where I think the quality of movement matters a lot too, is every step, every decel, every change of direction, like, how are they actually loading during these movements? And there is obviously an optimal way that you can see it, and I feel like a lot of times it gets lost with guys at the professional level, because you're like, oh, they've gotten to this level with, let's say, poor quality, so let's not change it, right? Where a lot of these guys are genetically gifted, right? Like, they have the ability to, like, even with some poor movement, like, they're still freaks and they can still get to the level that they are at. But when we see it in the general pop, like, you see it, you have an eye for it, you want to correct it right away. Just because, this person general pop, so maybe by correcting it, it's going to get them at a higher level. But then from a pro standpoint, you look at it like, maybe it doesn't matter because they're already at the pro level. Where I feel like every step that, especially the way Shay plays, for example, a lot of change of direction, a lot of pace, and being able to stop on a dime, like, for him, not only having the strength to do so and having the control of his body, but from a standpoint of, like, how he loads every step, hip positioning, foot positioning, like, I feel like a lot of that stuff is neglected, but plays a major role into, who he is. And a lot of that stuff is his natural ability, and it's us trying to not lose it. Like, I don't want to do stuff that's going to take you away from that. I just want to supplement that with some of the work we do, doing a lot of ISO work, doing a lot of, like I said, foot and ankle specific work, so that when you do load, when we do a lunge, it's gonna be in a position where your body's absorbing and loading force the same way. You go and you do a snatch dribble and you pull backs on somebody, and how you load there. So I feel like when you actually look at a player's movement, that it should kind of be taken into account when you do some of these exercises, because they're repetitively doing it anyways. So as closer we can get that movement to be more optimal, and then obviously optimal is such a gray area, like, I feel like a lot of that is a toss up, but you can kind of see it. I feel like when you have an eye for it, it's a little bit easier to see, yeah, this person, the way they move, it just looks, in a way more attractive, right? Our eyes don't deceive us. So like when something looks off, you can kind of see it right away. And, it's evident when somebody's like super knock-kneed, right? Like, and everything that they do is like here, you see that, you're like, ah, shit, maybe that's going to put a little bit of, excessive force on the knees and whatever the case is. So trying to fix those things, I feel like means more than like, all right, Shay, let's get you to a 400-pound deadlift. Like, how is that gonna benefit you you already have the strength, like you see it. Like he can shoulder bump anybody in the league and can stop on a dime and never really seems like he's off balance. So just being able to kind of do that, how many ever reps he does in a game on a day-to-day basis I think is the most important part.
Yeah, and shout out to AP, Andrew Paul with OKC, because he really taught me the value of like training within or training away from like an athlete's strength, and like when do you do that, when it's smart to do that, and just educating the athlete on like what that looks like, educating them on like how their body is, what their genetic makeup is, where their strengths are, educating them on that, but then also educating them on those weaknesses, on those like biomechanical weaknesses, like in these propulsive patterns, like you're not as strong, but in these absorption patterns, like you might be, you might excel, right? So again, for Shay, Nikhil, all these stuff, when are you training within or training away? And like, again, with Shay living in those like patterns, like, is that something you're constantly working on with him, even in season, or are you saving some of that for the off season? Like, when are you finding that out?
I agree with that from a standpoint of like, I feel like an athlete's build and structure has to be taken into account. Some guys are just bulkier by nature. Some guys have that, slimmer physique and more like a sprinter's physique, you know what I mean? And I feel like the both of them are like that. So if I were to just be like, all right, Shay, let's gain 30 pounds of muscle, like how is that going to positively impact his game, right? Like he's so used to being slim, strong, like just now, trying to get all this size, like, is that really going to benefit him from a standpoint of how he plays? I would argue no. So I try to keep the training based around that. Like, sure, I still want to develop the strength and the power and the athleticism qualities, but again, I feel like for him, the level that he's at and the wear and tear his body goes through on a day-to-day, like basketball is not a natural thing for us to do on a day-to-day basis. Like it's still compressive in nature, like the running, the jumping, you're on hardwood in those compressed shoes, doing all these things. So it's a matter of like, what can we do to negate some of that, to allow you to do that, but keep up the qualities of the strength and the athleticism. So I would say during the off season, we work on some of his weaknesses, of course, in terms of trying to develop, some of those athletic abilities, a little bit more strength. But during the season, I feel like the most important thing is to just, work on your athlete's strengths and make sure, you continue to work on some of the weaknesses, but not to a level of like, all right, we're overdoing things where the volume is just so high. Like I want to make sure basketball is your main priority. This stuff just needs to supplement it, where I feel like a lot of guys get lost in terms of like, they try to make the weight room stuff the priority. Like, all right, let me treat this guy like a bodybuilder and, just try and get as big as possible, where not everybody is going to benefit from having a LeBron's physique. Like, having just wide shoulders and just being able to bulldoze people. Like not everybody plays like that, not everybody moves like that. So I feel like that has to be taken into account. And so I agree with AP on that as well.
Yeah, so we touched on kind of, are we training what they're already good at? Are we looking to improve kind of their weaknesses or what we think their weaknesses might be as a already professional athlete? We've touched on this like idea of movement and good movement, quality movement, someone that moves well. I think SGA and Nikhil, like those are going to be like anomalies almost. They're multiple standard deviations away from the high school athlete that's just trying to get a college look, right? So what might be a few of the big things that a high school kid could like identify and be like, okay, these are movement patterns that I have to have, and maybe off of that, when you are observing movement, because it's something you're clearly like conscious of and watching all the time, is it a joint by joint approach? Like, are you watching in here on the court? Like, is it an ankle, knee, hip kind of approach that you take? Is it a global movement pattern? We know a lot of the common movements that we see in the NBA. If you could touch on those, like really, like what are the movement specific things we want to see from a high school athlete, and then what's the approach that you take as a strength and conditioning coach for them?
For sure, I think the way I kind of break it down and look at it, I always try to look at how an athlete walks and sprints, like how they actually go about. Like everybody's body is going to do something different, right? There is, I feel like, a global kind of, like you said, global pattern, global principle, but it's not going to look identical with everybody. However, from a sprint standpoint, from a change of direction standpoint, from, on a basketball court, and even in the weight room standpoint, like you said, from foot, ankle, knee, hip, up, when an athlete is doing some sort of lunge or some sort of, squat pattern, whatever the case is, how are they actually loading from the foot up? Like, does it look like, okay, foot is engaged, knee is, in a position where it can absorb, we're able to, get into that glute, those hamstrings, and use those muscles. I feel like a lot of guys, like I said, from a leg standpoint, we get very compressed and just like front side dominant, and we start to lose the ability to move from, like, look at the size of our glutes and our hips. Like, that is our power, right? So we start to lose the ability to move from there. So from a movement standpoint, from what I'm looking for, I'm a youth athlete, is the same thing. Like, how are they loading in the weight room patterns, especially a lunge? I feel like some sort of variation of a lunge is like the most, for me, most important, movement exercise pattern I can do with a basketball player specifically, is all the change of direction. Like, you're always in some sort of split stance. Very rarely are you jumping just bilateral, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of it is some sort of split stance, whether you're in a defensive stance, whether you're changing direction, whether you're doing a through the legs dribble to go, whatever the case is your body's in some sort of lunge, right? And how do you load during that? How do you load when you do a full sprint? Like, these little things I try and look at to see, okay, where is this athlete at? And at a younger age, it's easier to work with because they're not 10, 12, 15 years of, sometimes poor habits, poor loading patterns, right? They're not at that level, so you can get maybe more of a change from it if you spend time working on it. But I feel like understanding from the foot up and how that athlete loads is so important, because you got to be able to see it and then know how to adjust. And that's where I feel like a lot of the stuff gets lost. It's kind of like, oh, this athlete moves like this. Maybe that's just how they move. Let's leave it like that. Where I feel like you can always improve a little bit. The same way, it's easy for us to, as strength coaches, this squat looks poor. Let's try and, improve this squat. Well, why don't we apply that same concept to how this athlete runs, how this athlete changes direction? Like, there is going to be an optimal way for that athlete. I'm not saying we're robots and everybody's going to look the same, but each person is going to have an optimal way to kind of go about it. And I feel like as a coach, it's our job to be able to kind of see that and work towards that goal. So for me, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and shout out to Lee Taft, because he does a good job of like merging those two worlds, like S&C, and like how does it actually translate to a change of direction, step back,
right? Like,
how do we train that? You talked a lot about decompression and compression and how we're living in these like compressive states. I didn't send this one to you ahead of time, but can you talk about like spinal decompression in particular? And again, like for those that follow you, when you're working on that stuff, like the attention to detail when it comes to biomechanical alignment and like how you're positioning your body while doing the breath work, while just being conscious of like everything going on, and like the lengthening. Like, can you just speak to like the benefits of that? And how you're tapping into that? Because again, like that's something that I think on the team side, again, like AP did a great job of trying to do that and things like that, but it's tough to do on the team side because it takes so much education. It's like almost like Olympic lifts, right? Like it's so technical that it's like, when do you fit that in? How do you fit it in? And for most guys, like, how do you even get like buy-in for stuff like that?
For sure. That's where I feel like the individual side of things is sometimes a little bit easier, because if guys are going to be with you, they're going to buy into things a little bit easier. Like they're coming here, they're spending their money to train with you. If you give them something that, you're doing it for their best interest, they're gonna be like, all right, let me give it a go. I think when it comes to like the spinal decompression in general is, to me, is super important from a athlete standpoint, but also from a life standpoint. Like constantly sitting, nobody's really aware of their posture at all times. And in terms of, if we're sitting here doing this podcast for an hour long, like I could easily be here crouching down, like, you know what I mean? Like my body is compressing by default. Like gravity is doing that to us on a day-to-day basis. And as I kind of got into it a little bit more, and I would say a lot of the stuff I learned from that standpoint is Dr. Eric Goodman foundation training, and just using the breath to be able to kind of decompress. And again, doing it myself, doing it with my athletes. I like to do it at the beginning of our sessions, essentially just trying to find more length in that spine and in the hips. Give our body the ability to function from a more lengthened position, right? Like muscles don't want to go from short to shorter, they want to go from long to short. That's where you can kind of generate more of that force. So without kind of getting into the science behind it, it's kind of like having the ability to just find length, feel like you're taller in a more decompressed state where you have more access to your body to be able to move. And using the breath to do so. So there are a few things that matter, and it's like, because it is so technical and it takes a lot, it's almost like a learning process every time we do it. You're gonna get better at it the same way you're gonna get better at dribbling a ball, you're shooting a ball, the more you do it. The more, like the first time you ever went and did a squat, you probably felt like, damn, like, well, what is this? What do I feel? You get to a point where even as coaches, like we do stuff, our body awareness is usually pretty high, but you get better at stuff the more you do it. You start to feel different things. You start to feel the ability to like, okay, as I'm doing this movement, now I can actually physically feel my glutes or my hammy, whatever the case is, you physically feel the things. And with some of the decompression breathing work, being able to set an anchor with your hips and then use the breath to essentially lengthen that spine to give, the nerves their space. Like they don't want to be compressed. That's where a lot of the issues arise from, is like constant compression, being in this flex position, especially in that thoracic spine. That's where we have so much mobility and movement. And I feel like a lot of guys that I've worked with, like that's where they first start to lose their ability to move. Once you lose that, you lose it elsewhere. You lose it in the hips. You lose it, in the rest of the body. And having the ability to kind of like pay attention to those details, use the breath, feel the change. And like I said, the more I do it myself, the better I get at it, the better it is, or easier it is to coach somebody through it, because you know what they're feeling. And you get to a point where you can actually feel like almost like a self-adjustment to in your spine. Like you feel like, wow, it just felt like a little pop, like a little release of I've created space, I've created length just by using the breath. And I feel like the breath is such a foundational thing to human life that we don't really pay attention to it until you see some of the poor habits that people might have, whether that's mouth breathing, whether that's shallow breathing, chest only, stomach only, like whatever the case is, we've lost the ability to 360 degrees breathe, right? Be able to expand that entire rib cage, backside, front side to side, whatever it is, to be able to use our breath to actually open space and give our body the ability to move better.
Yeah, we got a few minutes left with you, so I think we'll go a little more rapid fire here. One that I've got, and this is something that I've taken from like a lot of the content that you've posted outside of the movement stuff that we've covered a lot, is that kind of mental side and those habits like that you're trying to build with your athletes. Time of year we're at, a lot of people are looking to make changes in their lives, and what are like 1, 2, 3 things that on the habits or the mental side that you think a high school athlete, a college athlete that's really looking to push themselves can implement into their lives that take them to that next level, or allow them to train harder, or allow them to recover better?
First and foremost for me, nutrition, right? Like it's one of those things that I feel every aspect of an athlete's life, or just anybody, a person's life, matures over time, except their food, right? Like eating, sure, as a kid, you're gonna eat kid meals, kid lunches, kid breakfast, whatever the case is. But as we age, like that stuff should also start to kind of mature in a way. Like instead of me just eating cereal for breakfast, like let me make some actual conscious decisions and, put some intent into this to give my body the ability to just perform at a higher level. And it's not so much of like, just because you feel like you can, like, sure, guys are still genetic freaks and, they'll be able to get away with eating certain things and not feel the benefit or feel the effects of it right away. It's going to catch up over time, for everybody. But if you can deliberately make those decisions early on, it just sets you up for a level of like, okay, like this discipline, I feel like it requires the most discipline out of anything, right? Like you're bored, you're tired, you just want to snack on something. If you have the discipline to be like, no, like this doesn't serve me for me to eat this every single day, then why am I doing it? It's so much easier to apply that discipline to every aspect of life, whether that's your training, whether that's your sleep. So I feel like it all stems from a nutrition standpoint, the decisions you make there. And then I would say sleep recovery is number two, and then your training and what you do like off the court, and that matters the most. Like I think your sport has to be your number one priority. If you get to an age where you're already in one sport, sure, if it's early on, like play at everything, do everything so you can develop as an athlete as a whole. But if you're at an age where, okay, basketball is my thing, well, what you do outside of basketball means more, because you're only doing this for, let's say, an hour or two a day, and you can have all the discipline in the world, for that hour or two, but then all of a sudden, you're lazy off the court, you're late everywhere you go, your nutrition sucks, your sleep sucks. All that stuff is going to catch up to you eventually, and it's going to impact your basketball. And I think there still needs to be a level of, you enjoy life and stuff, but not everyone's going to be able to do it the Kobe way, where they're just so laser focused and like almost like it seems like they're doing nothing outside of this, where I still feel like you have to have some sort of enjoyment. And I think Shay, for example, does a great job of like enjoying everything in life, being happy all the time, but dedicating a lot of time to his craft and trying to get better. So yeah, I would say nutrition, recovery, and then what you do outside of your sport from a training standpoint.
You've been with Shay long before the MVP conversations. Like, what did you see early that made you believe like his ceiling was different in particular?
Definitely his maybe not so much the first summer, because it was a little chaotic. He went through his trade. It was our first time working together. Because after that summer, I feel like once he started to see some of the benefits of actually putting in work outside of basketball, because of his ability to just like, his discipline, Shay's a guy, like I've never really seen him kind of get distracted by things outside of basketball. Like I think is like top of the world when it comes to that. Like, the life of an NBA player, lifestyle, going out, partying, all the people that are wanting something from you. And I feel like his ability to just kind of stay level-headed with what he's trying to accomplish from a basketball standpoint, from a legacy standpoint, that showed me right away, like, okay, he's gonna be able to accomplish these things because he's not distracted at all. Like he's not doing anything outside of basketball that's gonna, affect him negatively, whether that's constantly partying, drinking, whatever the case. Like he wasn't doing any of that stuff. As he started to put more and more time, it's like, okay, I see, he was young at the time, so like he started to see what it takes from an outside of on the court standpoint, like taking care of your body, getting better with your nutrition, all of those things. That showed me like, all right, he's going to be able to accomplish certain things that, guys get to that level and they're just kind of complacent. I made it to the NBA, now I can kind of chill. I can enjoy the life that comes with it. And to me, it feels like for him, it's always been basketball and how do I improve and build some sort of legacy for myself. So that was the first thing and most important thing I've seen with him.
Yeah, and I think that's so important as strength coaches, whatever, like on the team side, you see certain players get treated a certain way because you know or anticipate that they're not serious, right? Like their lifestyle isn't serious, Their mindset's not serious. So you kind of like treat them a certain way, just out of full transparency. Like whether it's like attention to detail, it's just not the same from what I've seen. But again, I think when you understand who an athlete like Shay could be or is, then that level, kind of elevates a little bit. But I think it's important as strength coaches, as people listening, practitioners, whatever, that regardless of what that ceiling is, like you're providing that same level of, and from what I've seen with your content, like whether it's youth, high school, pro, I'm sure maybe like elderly, like that same level of detail is like the same, right?
Yeah,
it's like you're trying to maximize performance regardless of what performance is to that person.
100%. And I feel from a human level, like everybody wants to feel good in life and not be in pain. So all those details I think matter to everybody. And just because Shay's at an MVP level, I'm not going to give him, more attention to detail than somebody else that I'm working with. Like whoever I'm going to work with, they are seeking me out to help them. So I want to make sure I give them everything I got, and in terms of the detail and just everything from a life standpoint. Like this is what they're coming to get out of me. It's not just you're not in the NBA, you're not going to get the same training. Like that's not how it goes. And I feel like that's why with him, at the time when we started working, I didn't think he was going to be. I didn't know much about him and his level. I didn't think it was going to be this. But as I started to see it over the years, nothing really changed in terms of what I'm just trying to get better with what I do, the same way he's trying to improve his. Like year by year, we try to implement something more, something to improve his game, whether that's the foot stuff, whether that was like spending a summer just like focusing on breath work, a lot of like the decompression, whatever the case is. I'm always trying to improve his body, his game, the same way, I'm trying to improve my craft and what I can offer. But yeah, like I feel like whoever you're working with, you got to pay attention to those things, because everybody deserves to, be able to function at a high level, whatever that high level is for them. Whether they're a CEO, whether they're just working a regular 9 to 5, like I know the beauty in feeling good and waking up not in pain. So like for me, I want everybody to be able to experience that, whatever level you're at.
Yeah. Dope. Anything else?
One more.
One more.
Last question.
Yeah.
Somebody's watching this and didn't know that this was a potential career path for them to work with professional athletes or high-level athletes, but do it in more of a one-on-one setting and be kind of their person that they go to. What's your favorite part of that as like your career of choice, and what's something that is maybe something that someone wouldn't know about that role? Is it the travel? Is it the constant communication? Like, what's your favorite part? And then what's something that someone seeing this for the first time is like, oh, I wouldn't even have thought of that as part of their role?
Yeah, I would say the trust factor that you get. And like for me, after that first summer of working with Shay, they finished it was during the COVID time, so they finished their bubble. He was back in Hamilton and he hit me up. That, like, having the trust and respect from somebody to be like, all right, I want to work with you again, knowing they enjoyed what you did, they saw the benefit, like that was my favorite part, that they came back to you. And you can never take that for granted, because you see it all the time. Guys will switch, they'll be in a different place, they're like, I want to work with this guy, he's more popping on Instagram, everybody's going to him. And I feel like when you have that respect and trust, and you develop a relationship on a personal level with somebody, that to me is my favorite part. Like, it's not just strictly business anymore. It's like, all right, like, Shay's my dog. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we've developed a brotherhood over the years, and that to me is like, means the world, because he trusts me with what I do, but on a personal level, like, we're also cool, we get along, and we're in constant communication aside from just, training, right? Like, it's like, yo, like, how are you? How's life? How's everything, right? In terms of what people might not know, I would say is the commitment factor that it takes in terms of, the detail you actually have to provide. It's not just, you work with a general pop person, like they'll ask you questions here and there outside of your training hours, but for the most part, you spend an hour a day, 3-4 times a week with them. And that's kind of like all the attention that they get or you give them, aside from like maybe nutrition check-ins and stuff like that. You'll develop relationships, of course, because you spend so much time with somebody. But this, like, I'm watching every game these guys play, not just from an entertainment standpoint, but like, how do they look on the court? Like, you know, did anything happen from a movement standpoint? You know, knock on wood, any injuries that might occur that pop up, like what could have happened? How do they look just from a, you know, all outside of, I just want to watch them play. I also want to see like what's going on, how the stuff that we're doing is now tying back into what he's doing on the court. So I feel like it becomes your life too, because you're dedicating so much time to it. And I constantly want to see them succeed, them get better, which ties back into like, okay, what can I offer more? How can I continue to get better? And that part is like, I mean, like I said, you're watching every game, you're paying attention to everything. If something does happen, like he had a minor little ankle roll on his game tying shot the other day. All right, how do you feel? This is what I want you to kind of do right after that happened. Like just little things like that, you know, you're not doing from a money standpoint anymore. It's kind of like, okay, like you pay me for your services, let's say during the summertime, but like what you do during the season means everything to me, because now it's going to dictate how the summer looks, the trust that you have in me, the respect factor and all that. So I would say, yeah, that's like the thing that people might not see and know because of how much they go through, like I said, their schedule on a day-to-day and how much focus and attention you have to give.
Yep. Cool. I know you got to run. We've selfishly taken a lot of time. Last thing, just anything you have upcoming that you want to share, promote, where people can find you on social media, just those final
for sure.
comments.
Yeah, so I'm definitely, like I said, mentioned before, I've been getting more into the youth space, and I want to be able to, with my schedule, with traveling, with, you know, I can't see everybody in person, but I want to be able to reach more people, especially from a basketball standpoint, youth athletes, youth basketball players, and give them some of the training that I provide and some of my knowledge, some of my information, give them the ability to kind of work with me and learn from me. So I'm working on developing a youth kind of coaching program coming out where it'll run for like 12 weeks at a time, you know, hopping on weekly calls, giving them all the information that they need to be doing on a week-to-week basis in terms of, you know, how I want them to structure things early on, lifestyle habits, off-the-court stuff, nutrition stuff, the whole kind of, you know, human aspect of it. And that's going to be dropping soon. I'm still working on it, still recording things just to make sure that they have all the information that they need from me. And that'll be hopefully within the next month or so coming out. I'm definitely going to keep, you know, posting about it. But that's my biggest thing. And then I also do a lot of stuff outside of the basketball world from an online standpoint. Ex-athletes, you know, guys that played at a high level, but they just want to get back to, you know, being able to do the things they love to do. I know how it is for me to wake up and be able to hoop, still be able to play a sport, be able to go run barefoot. Like being able to do those things as you get older feels good, especially if you're competitive. You want to be able to have something you can still compete in. And I like to work with people like that as well. Nowadays, everything is social media driven. So like a lot of my stuff is just through Instagram. Unlocked Nem is my Instagram name. And that's kind of where, you know, Unlocked being UNLKD, you know, you got to be a little hip when you come out with the name. So kind of shortening it, but it goes back into, like I said, the mindset of things and trying to unlock your full potential, whatever level you're at as a human, as an athlete. And that's kind of where you can find me, where you can reach out to me, and if we can work together, I always love to work with everyone.
Cool. Brother.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys having me out. That was fun.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Yes, sir.